Greetings. This is Tammy Browning-Smith, and I am honored to be here with you this evening at Sugar Cookie Marketing. It is always fun with doing a live type of situation because I can't see my audience. I can just talk to myself. But I am honored to be here this evening. He said, my name is Tammy Browning-Smith. I'm an attorney I live in the state of Delaware, but I practice primarily out of the state of Ohio. But why are you here this evening is the important question, and the important question of all is, I happen to work, I'm an intellectual property and business attorney that works in the creative industries, and believe it or not, there are attorneys that focus their practices on things such as cookies and sugar cookies and baking and small businesses and copyrights and trademarks. And so for the past, I've been an attorney for 21 years, but for the past 13 years I've owned the law firm of Browning-Smith PC, and our focus is on those who create. And what is fun about this is yes, I am a hobby cookier. Now, I do not sell. I get to enjoy all the lovely products that you all make and have fallen in love with the industry. Erin at Lucky Girl Cookies, who I give a big shout out to, is my teacher. And I have the joy of learning and creating, but I leave the selling to all of you. So I want to give a little bit of information because there's going to be people that are going to be coming in and out listening to this recording. And if you are, when you go to ask questions, please, if you are listening on the recordings, please put recording. So this way I'll know, because I'm going to share with you a little bit of info. Now, being non-technical, I'm actually very technical, but for the purposes of this video, I didn't want to use third-party services, just go directly in. I have some, making sure you might be able to see them, but I'm going to read them. Just some general guidelines. Of course, I'm an attorney. There's always fine print. Fine print. But let me read them to you, just so you get a good idea of this. All questions will be answered. Yes, I'm telling you, and I think that 27,000 of you all, if you were to answer me questions and send them to me, or I will answer them. Now, I can't guarantee how long it's going to take, but it's important to me to get your questions answered. So I'll be watching on the screen. People have asked questions beforehand that I'll be asking, but for basically an hour, you can play Stump Tammy. Or I almost feel like it's one of those dunk tanks where you're like throwing the balls, and it's like, ooh, can we get her? But my hope is that we'll get your questions answered. Once again, I am only licensed to practice law in the states of Texas, Michigan, and Ohio. And then I practice federal law. I have clients all over the world, actually. So please understand, if you're asking me a cottage law question, I mean, it's 50 states plus your local jurisdictions, plus it can get pretty wild. But I can give you some pretty broad ways to look at things and some resources. I'm prepped with resources for you. Just so you know, this is for educational purposes only. Facts, situations matter. So I'm not your attorney today. I'm an attorney that's giving you education, and happy and willing to help in what I can or get you to the right source. Laws are subject to change. So also please remember, especially if you're listening to this on tape, for example, just in this past month, our New Jersey friends now have cottage laws that they didn't. So if I had done this in August, I wouldn't have been, I wouldn't have had that information for you. So laws do change. And finally, this presentation, the Miracle Twins, I'm a twin, this is our property. Please don't, share this only with our permission. So with that being said, I want to give you a few quick rules of the road. So not only do I have a law degree, so I have a JD, but I also have a Master of Laws in Intellectual Property, so I'm a real geek at this stuff. So I'll try to keep it at level because we have about an hour, but I'm always, if I'll try not to get too much into the weeds. So just slowly start putting your questions out there, but I wanted to start first with some of the questions that came in when we were going to do this in August. And I do apologize and thank you all for coming again because I broke my leg in 2 spots. So I had to reschedule a few things. But first things first, and this is a question, this is a business question. This is from Brittany Cox, and it says, I would love to know if we should be considered a business like an LLC and have insurance. So there are so many business and LLC and S Corp and all sorts of business questions. So I wanted to start with some of those first. Whether you sell 1 cookie a year, whether you just advertise, whether you sell 1 million a year, cookies, cakes, anything, baked goods, any item, you are a business. Your classification of a business then basically how you want to be seen by the government and everybody around determines, is up to you. If you do nothing, you're a sole proprietor. When it gets tricky, and a lot of people like to do LLCs, limited liability companies, or corporations. So we had a wonderful CPA speak on this subject, and make sure you go back and look at that, review that live, because there's some wonderful information on there. But I'm going to give it to you from the legal perspective. From a legal perspective, an LLC, a limited liability company, and a corporation are pretty much, from a liability standpoint, the same. Taxes, they do make a difference. If you're getting insurance, and it also depends on the state. I happen to live in Delaware. I mean, we are the corporation state. But it's worth, whenever I have a new client come in, when I first started out, I worked with small businesses in the town I grew up in, Chelsea, Michigan. And I always would say, these are the professionals that you need. You need an attorney, of course. You need an insurance agent. You need a CPA. And then I would add, you need a banker. Now, you don't need to be putting all these people on retainer, but this is going to give you the advice. We are all trained to give you a little bit of information about your company. You may not need your insurance agent unless once a year. Your accountant you're going to need once a year, and especially to start up. Your attorney, same thing. And then I usually only want to see you for things like copyrights and trademarks. I don't want to see for foodborne illnesses or anything. I do, but banker, because we just dealt with the whole, for those in the U.S., and by the way, this is all U.S. law, please. We just dealt with the PPP loans. So that's why I want, each person has their own thing. If you were to come to me, I would say to you, well, do you want to issue stock certificates? Do you want to be a subchapter S corporation? Or do you want to own percentages of your company? How much are you selling? So we look at ease of structure. But both a corporation and an LLC, if run correctly, give you the same amount of liability. So it becomes more about function instead of form. How are you going to function in your company? How do you handle your taxes? Yes, there was a question that I saw on one of these. You do have separate bank accounts. Think of it this way. In order to protect yourself, in order to get your max tax liability or your tax advantages, in order to get, the big one is, like I said, your max protection from lawsuits. Let's use the big term here. You're a separate. Your business literally becomes a separate entity. It becomes your child. It becomes, whatever you want to call it, but it becomes a separate entity. It has its own tax ID number and the like. Usually you start with this, and I see some reason why, if somebody asks even, when is the time to do this? Thank you, Nicole, I am recovering well. When do you start all of this? If you've been doing it for 20 years and you haven't done it yet, now's a great time to start. If you're just starting out and you're like, I have $100. I have $100 to start my company, do my cookie, get my, get my supplies and everything else. Slow and steady with a plan. Do you need to get your business license first or your cottage industry license first? Well, they go in tandem. Registering with a business, there's several different steps. You go on the state website or you meet with a professional. I want to be very clear on something. Online legal services have a purpose, but they're not always the best. Sometimes, especially with our small businesses, and by the way, small businesses, especially in the middle of the pandemic, I've even heard, 5 million and less type stuff, but there are a lot of resources. Say you don't have an attorney, but you have that banker. Say say you have an accountant, but you don't have an insurance agent. We all talk to each other as well. But you start there. Here's the other thing about cottage industry. Now we're adding in the food. USDA, local 4-H extension, even your local congressperson, your state rep, your state senator, a lot of them have small business types of situations. So you let them do the work for you. You have no idea where you start. You just know you make amazing baked goods. Reach out, use those resources, use those people you vote for to start the process. There's also a lot of money in grants, even small grants, the Small Business Association. But a lot of times you have to do those in tandem. So you can say, hey, look, I want to be Browning Smith LLC. Well, today I have Smith Cookies. Okay, we're going to be Smith Cookies LLC. Or I just want to be Smith Cookies and I want to be a business. I have no idea where to start. There are so many checklists. There are so many places for you to go. But a lot of times in order to get for cottage industry, for cottage industry purposes, or for baking home, commercial kitchens, regular kitchens, any of those states, like I said, we're dealing with 50, you have to apply in the name of your business. So you may have to start with your business, start even just, if it's just file something, one-page document with the state, then apply, and then keep going. So it's multiple places as they go through. And in regards to something of interest, so remember I said I'm a lawyer, not a CPA. I have JD, LLM, and a bunch of other titles behind my name, but not one of them is CPA. However, when do you deal with taxes? When do you have to start paying them? That's where you check with your CPA. Most of the time, like in, some states, I always call it the McDonald rule. I'm always surprised, when I go to McDonald's, do they charge me state tax, tax on food or not? That is such a state-by-state, jurisdictional type of issue. Some do require resale license. Some will say your cookies aren't, but if you're selling, DIY kits, they are, because you're selling other stuff besides the cookies. So that is really important that we go. Terry just asked a really great question that ties into this. In my county, my city won't give me my business license until my cottage permit was approved. They said, why get the business license if your cottage permit isn't approved? Aha, this is a great question because it sizes up a whole bunch of things. When I talk about business, I'm talking business structure. I'm talking limited liability company. I'm talking corporation, subcorporation, partnership, limited partnership, any of those things. That's your business entity. Then we go down to the licenses. Business, some places don't require business licenses to practice or to conduct business. Some states, some counties do. Some cities do. Some townships don't. Some parishes do. Some don't. So understand you have business structure, business organization, then you have your business licenses. So whether you apply for a business license first or your cottage, that's going to be a state by state situation. Will they approve the business versus, the cottage, because they are interconnected. However, some states, and it's true, don't care. Some states don't, some counties don't care. You just go in and you're ready to go. So that is, Terry, unfortunately, you have hit one of those that has to review everything because they want to make sure they're getting all their tax revenue. And so that's why one without the other. That is where, in these types of situations, it is so important that you check with your county's development office or small business office. I know that just sounds weird. I'm gonna call a state senator. I'm gonna call the state rep. I'm gonna call my city council person. Absolutely. There are resources galore for that. I always say, use your tax money at work. So, to give everything a fair shot, when we're talking businesses here, in business formation, and insurance, by the way, we could have a whole, and by the way, all of these, I give 2 to 3 hour lectures. I'm blessed enough that people want to hear me speak at conventions and all sorts of events. So, those are whole entire, setting up a creative business and how to look at that. Those are whole entities, but at least I'm trying to give you some structure and some ideas on how to keep things rolling, and how to look at those. If I could tell you to sum up for businesses, at least for now, the important things are: use your resources. Best place to find people are word of mouth. Make sure you have professionals, even their names. And above all else, become a business entity. If you are selling, become a business entity. Make it a business entity that you understand. But in the long run, it's not as expensive as you thought. It doesn't have to be as complicated as you thought. But if you want to deal with insurance, if you want to deal with your permits and licenses and all of those things, you have to have it. And a quick note about insurance. I don't know how to put this, but bluntly, if you're doing business, you need to be doing insurance. If you can't get insurance, then you should be looking at why you can't get insurance. Unless you have a nice little bankroll sitting there, which very few of us do. Accidents happen. Say somebody's asking, they use somebody else's commercial kitchen. They use, so therefore those people should be liable. In legal situations, everybody's named and then they ferret out who has, who gets what or who's liable for what. So I encourage you, even if you're a one-person shop, figure out what it takes to get that insurance. Business insurance is not as expensive as you think. Baked, I always call it baked good, like cottage insurance, food insurance. I deal with so many different ones, so I call them all sorts of things. It's not as expensive as you think, and it surely is not as expensive as a lawsuit. But once again, working with advisors, and a lot of them do it pro bono. Look, I'm here tonight to help you develop that plan. Maybe you can't afford insurance right away, but there are other things that you can do to help mitigate your liability, which is why we roll into the next thing, and I'll answer Joe, is there less liability risk with cottage law versus commercial kitchen, or vice versa? At the end of the day, the more third-party services you can use, the better off you're going to be to limit your liability. And I don't know what to call you, Joe, or anyway, Joseph Mayer asked the question with the cutest dog picture ever. is there less liability? Please feel free to follow up, because it's a pretty complicated question depending on your situation and your state. And also, how much insurance do you need? That's what your professionals are for. At least I always say whatever the minimum is, they'll give you. But sometimes you're required to have more. So that's following up to make sure all of your agreements or whatever you're doing. But in my world, if you don't have, insurance covers your equipment, insurance covers all sorts of things. So business insurance is going to be one amount, where liability insurance is going to be another. So what is a way to help keep yourselves out of trouble with your customers? I use clients, you'll hear all sorts of words. And so now we go from business to contracts. Invoices, messages back and forth, telephone calls, all sorts of, how you interact with how do you keep your interactions with your customers legal? I had a ton, and by the way, I had 18 pages of questions that I went through here to try to mix them together so I could answer some of these. So at the end of the day, Contracts 101, the second day of law school, I sat in contracts and they tell me contracts are a bargain for exchange. Never get into a contract unless you know how you're going to get out of a contract. And now here's the rest of the semester, or actually 9 more credit hours worth. Let me just be clear on something. You're going to make the best attempt possible. We'll talk here for a few minutes about perfect language, and some of your questions had that about, deposits versus cancellation versus retainers and all sorts of things. At the end of the day, contracts are your roadmap. I review 3 to 5 contracts a week. Some of them are 1 page, some of them are 20 plus pages. Some of them are worth $100. I just reviewed one 2 weeks ago that was about $25 million in an airplane. How do I do it? Maybe it's the creative person in me, but I make pictures and roadmaps. Contracts need to tell a story. You never present something to somebody that you don't understand, and never sign something that you don't understand. So that's leases, that's contracts for, that's services. At the end of the day, it needs to be clear, and your entire understanding of what you're doing with that person needs to be on that 8.5 by 11 or whatever piece of paper. You're not going to get all the words right. If I had to write the perfect contract that had every situation and everything considered, it would be 6-point font and probably 45 pages. But here are some ideas based on your questions. Contracts, in order to have them be valid, have to have consideration. So even if somebody places an order with you and you're saying, I'm not going to get anything up front, you've been my client for years, get $1. Get $1. What that says is, first off, it's a valid contract. So if you need to enforce something against them, and if they need to enforce something against you, but when you have a contract, and this goes along what we've all been dealing with this past year, now that we have this wonderful thing called sugar cookie marketing that tells us we're worth something. So our time is valuable. And how do you ensure you're going to get paid? And one of it is doing the icky thing is talk about money. Ugh, even I hate it. It's like, how much are you an hour? How much are we going to get up front? But it's being honest up front. That's why I'm a member of the group too, because I enjoy reading the wins that you guys have. But I also struggle with you at all right, I finally had somebody didn't show up. But being clear with your policies. Being clear with your policies and procedures is the best legal advice I can give you, but it's also some of the best customer service and marketing advice. The customer knows how you're going to do business, especially in light of the fact that they're really not going to know what they're getting until it's the day of delivery. And sometimes it's special life events. But some of the hints that are important, don't be afraid. If you have an important item, if something's like, I require you pay me 1 week before I start. Even on DocuSign, even on all this electronic stuff, don't be afraid to put an initial by it so that they have to initial it and you initial it, because it calls it out. It calls out, so you can bold the crap out of something, but if you put that initial there, sometimes it draws attention to it. Plus, if they say, I didn't see it, voila. So that is, that's an important thing to consider. Pointing those out. Remember, clean, simple language in your agreements. Sketches, or as much information as you can about what you're doing. And I'm just talking about between you and your customer at the moment, because somebody said, do I have to include, one of the questions was, do I have to include sketches with my with my agreements? Yes, if you can, that's wonderful. But at the end of the day, you're not always able to do so. So with contracts, once again, clean, simple, deposits. But here's the icky part. What happens if something goes wrong and they don't show up? What happens if they just don't pay? Are contracts worth the paper they're written on? And I'm going to say no. Contracts are worth what the two people who do business with, how they do business. You don't want to sue. Let's get real, now I see some of your all's orders and I am mighty impressed. But at the end of the day, it's not worth going after a $500 order. You can go to small claims court and you have the time to deal with it. So that's why I always love when somebody says, how do I respond? When in doubt, leave it out. And that includes customers too. If this just isn't right, it doesn't get better. It only gets worse. And time is money. And dealing back and forth. For some of you all, you've put consultation fees involved. That's great. If somebody's asking you to draw all of the stuff up in advance without, a commitment of time, you've basically just given them everything. What I'm trying to say is contracts are great. I encourage you to have language that says, if you don't pay me within a week, I can terminate the agreement. If you don't show up at the agreed upon time, you forfeit your order and any funds paid. You're going to put that in there. That's a 1-sentence, 2-sentence type of situation. One we had recently where we do not Uber. I thought that was great. But at the end of the day, it's that intrinsicness. You are smart, intelligent, amazing business people. Of course, you have great, I personally think, you have, your judgment's great. You're listening to me, you belong to SCM. Hey. But trust that. Trust that. I can't tell you how many times when I'm dealing with contracts that have gone south that one of the first things they say is, I just knew something was going to be wrong here. If you have concerns, that's also why you have an agreement. Because there's nothing wrong. Once you come up with an agreement and you have the space where you're going to put, it's going to be 1 dozen, and it's going to have all sorts of lovely, it's going to be under the sea theme, and you're going to pick it up at 8 o'clock on Friday. But the person keeps saying, I just don't know what I want. I don't know what I want. That's where you can freely say, anything over an hour of consultation is going to cost this. Or you think the person, they're just not going to pick up, or they haven't, I know they're going to pay, but they've done it before and they've just haven't paid. So what? You know what you say? Late payment fees are this, but the deadline is this. You can add language a lot of times to help cover some of those concerns. But at the end of if all else fails and you just feel it's wrong, follow your gut. Trust your gut. It's a lot cheaper than somebody like me. Because when you have to come to me, my husband always says this to people. He'll ask me, what do you do? And I love when Dale says this to people. And he says, oh, trust me, she makes far more on the back end than she does on the front end. That makes it sound kind of weird. But technically, prevention is always cheaper than cleaning it up. So we've talked about business. I've tried to answer some of those questions. Let me take a look more here. So can we make cookies in Texas before getting a cottage license certificate? We are pursuing official business name setup first. Well, I'm going to argue no. You can make cookies any day of the week. Can you sell them? If you don't have your license or certificate in place, I don't, and this is where having to recall even 3 states is a little difficult. There's no temporary provisions. So at the end of the day here, you get your business name, absolutely, but remember I said you're going to go back and forth, back and forth. Can we make cookies? Yes, you can always make cookies any day of the week. I'll be happy to give you my address, which I will at the end. I have a little thing. But you have a license for a reason. Sorry. Right. And I apologize for keep going because I'm flipping through all these papers to ask you. One other quick thing about contracts before we go on. Deposits versus retainers. Deposits and retainers is truly a state-by-state situation. Retainer is usually for services. Deposits are for a specific item, or task. How do courts? Somebody asked this question and said, are courts? How does that handle it? Yeah, it's just a swap of names. But another one here, which was when it was Kimberly Tracy, said, regarding deposits and retainers, can that money be spent before services cookies are delivered? And then somebody asked, right, and if your contract states no refunds, is it truly no refunds? So if you're an attorney, no. If it's a retainer, sometimes this is where it gets a little funky. Sometimes it all depends on what your contract says. So if you're getting money in advance, without any sort of writing, and by the way, when I talk writing, it's more than an email. If all else fails, you put it in an email and you have somebody confirm it. It's going to be a $25 deposit. Is that okay? The person signs back and says yes, and then sends you $25. However, we're going to learn a new word to go in front of deposit or retainer. It's called non-refundable. Here's the fun thing about this. If you say there's a $25 deposit, and you say, it's due, before I even put your name on my calendar, your deposit is non-refundable. Well, you've just opened up the door for a question. I know, people can't always read, but hey. So our new word that we're going to put with deposit is non-refundable deposits. So we no longer have deposits. They're always non-refundable deposits, straight up. So there's never a question. Put those two words together. You can still put the sentence, and that's great, but non-refundable deposit is clear from the beginning. So they can't say to you, well, I paid you $25. You're like, you didn't even see the word next to you. So the question to follow up here was, can the money be spent before services cookies are delivered? Believe it or not, that's a state-by-state issue. Majority of you all, especially even if it's non-refundable, like, I'll tell you, if you're an attorney, absolutely not. Don't even think about it. Majority of you are going to be fine. For the purposes of your business and your ethics, I wouldn't do it. If somebody gives you a $25 deposit on a $50 order, and you need to spend that $25 on their order, that's one thing. I would even go as far, now this is going to blow some of y'all's mind, and I am so sorry. I would, like, as an attorney, now I know there's a difference here. I have a separate escrow account, or I have a separate account just for my deposits. And then when I spend it, I flip it over. I'm not suggesting y'all have to have trust accounts or, interest-only legal trust accounts or trust. I'm just saying, make sure. There are times, even though we say non-refundable deposit, we have to do so. Don't get yourself into a hole. If you have to separate it out, separate it out. If your customers are like, well, don't it make you feel better if you wrote it out to Smith Cookies trust account or Smith Cookies deposit account versus Smith Cookies? Oh yeah, it's non-refundable, but I'm just simply saying, if you're collecting large deposits, or if you have those types of worries about, can I spend them in advance? Yes, if somebody gives you a deposit because you need to buy cookie cutters or you need to buy supplies in advance for the project, absolutely you spend it in advance. But I'm just simply saying, watch that there's always that balance and that you have a way to account for it in case there's a problem. Okay, so now here comes the fun one, because I've got a whole 18 minutes. It's funny, I sent our friends today a little thing. I said, how long are we going to be here today? And she says, oh, do you think you can stay an hour? I'm like, honey, I've been doing this for all sorts. Real quick, Terry asked, before I head on, did you say there really wasn't a legal difference between deposit and retainer? I'm using retainer. Not really. Just watch state laws. Sometimes there is, some of our international friends might have that, but no, technically not really. Not really. Okay, the last thing to talk about here before I get booted off the island, or I run out of, yes, lawyers do have hot air. I was going to say I run out of air. Yeah, that's funny. I will get a drink here. Let's talk copyrights and trademarks. The love and joy of my life, the reason for my living. No. Copyrights and trademarks. So patents cover formulas, ideas, methods, and processes. Copyrights cover fixed, tangible acts of creativity. Trademarks are brand source identifiers. Is it possible to have something that's copyright, trademark, and copyrightable patent? Yes, but that's a whole other thing. So why do we care? At the end of the day here, and of course, now I have business expenses. Here's our little cookie cutters here. I look at this cookie cutter by our friends at the cookie counter. And say, look at all the IP in this cookie cutter. But you say, Tammy, it's a plaque. What about our names of our businesses? So this, like I said, I see so much in here. Newport plaque. The name of our, so let me go over three different things here. Let's talk trademarks. Primarily, your business names are going to be trademarks. Your logos are going to be trademarks and copyrights. The first thing I want to say on any of this is, don't get it if you're not going to enforce it. Secondly, they can be expensive, but they don't have to be. This is where, somebody says, do I have to have an attorney trademark my logo or trademark my business name? I'm going to be honest with you. No, you don't. You can go to the USPTO, that's U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, look up one of your competitors and how they filed for it, copy that almost word for word, You use the categories, whatever, and file it, and pay $225, $250, however you filed. And you probably have about a 60 to 70% chance of getting it done. And what you don't, then you call the examiner and they help you out. So, do you need an attorney? No. Is that a wise move? No. Of course I'm going to say that. However, is it better than nothing? Yes. Are there some of you out here who have been paralegals? Are there some of you out here who have had substantial business careers, or are just downright, I don't care if you have a degree in high school diploma or not, you're just downright smart people. You have to be, you're savvy as all get out to be here. You can do it yourself. But remember, when in doubt, it may be worth an attorney's time. Can be anywhere, legal fees can be anywhere from $300 to $1,000 on up. And then each category, because you register in categories. So, cookie cutter is probably just going to be one category, but you never know. Business name, that's just probably going to be one category. But it could be internet sales, and it could be something else. So when it comes to, do you trademark your name? Some people, you can trade, so in the United States, trademark protection starts the moment you used it in commerce. So there's interstate and intrastate and all of this, so that basically there's in your state or across state lines. But in order to protect it, in order to defend it, especially online, you're going to have to usually register it with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. I will be honest with you, I have yet to register a state trademark. Is it worth it? It will be, especially coming up. It's usually worth it if you're doing a lot of online and you have concerns. Copyrights, of your logo. If you have some really swanky cookie designs, or you're doing some product you're going to copyright, like this is an example. Some of you do these wonderful practice sheets. Shapes. You've got a square. It's not going to happen. But I brought a fun difference. Yeah, like I said, I get to do this here for a second. And I hope I remember where I got these from. So they're pretty much marked. So this is my Killer Zebra 50. Boy, you can't tell how old I'm about to get. 5, you're like, how can you protect that? Oh, do we have hours for that? But this is copyright protectable. Just as this. So when everybody's trying to do 3, this is my beer stein here. Because that shape is protectable. Along with my stencil. I don't know if you can see that too. I had a bachelor party thing that I was playing with. So please be very careful when you say to each other, I'm going to grab, I see this, oh, Tammy, hold on, hold this up, draw me a drawing, I'm going to 3D print it. I save myself a lot of money by 3D printing my own. Sorry, y'all. About to blow some bubbles. I'm about to lose everybody watching me here when I say, that's really copyright infringement. When you take somebody's, now I'm not talking square or circle, I'm talking somebody's drawing, even outline, and you make it because you want to save yourself some money. First off, what's going to incentivize that designer to buy more, or to design, or to buy, I should say, to create more, if everybody's just going to steal it? And second off, it really is. That's their image, that's their design. Unless somebody gives them proof, pony up the $7.50 or $10 or whatever and buy it. That's copyright infringement. Same thing goes, because I'm about to go into the second part, which we've gone to businesses here, but same thing goes, there are times that I really just have to look at websites, and remember, I'm a cookier myself, and Instagram I love. Just have to go like this. The customers, they want Disney. The customers, They want Jurassic Park, you know, all of this. Um, so this is where I'm going to be point blank honest with you. It's stealing. I'm about to be really unpopular. It's copyright infringement. When you are doing those designs, y'all know it. However, what is the likelihood that you're going to get in trouble for it? There are some fair use. There are some situations where it is permissible. They are small. But anytime you take the work of another and make money off of it, it's probably going to be infringement. Here is my concern. Doing little kids' birthday parties, doing stuff back and forth, it happens. Okay? I'm not here to tell you. I have to legally tell you, but it happens. But where it becomes risky is when you post it. Because social media platforms could give 2 wins less about what size you are. So if you're posting a lot of those pictures, either your competition could report you, and I'm not talking Disney or any of them, could report you, or you could get caught up in one of the bots. And you get caught up too many times, you become like one of the Miracle Sisters, and you get booted off the island on Facebook, and you go to Facebook jail. And if that's how you promote your business, or Instagram jail, or any of those, if that's how you promote your business, you're in trouble. And sometimes when they shut that down, that also means if you have contacts, if you have anything else, you lose your account. So that's where you run into more trouble. Yes, you want your customers to see that you can make an amazing Luca. And yes, you want your customers to see, you know, that the princesses are your jam. But I'm telling you, be cautious. I'm telling you, there can be inspiration that's not going to get you in trouble. There's all sorts of options available. I agree. If they're a paying customer and they say, I want the princesses, and nobody's going to see it, you know, except you and the other people, that's got to be a hard one to turn down. But then also think about how you're publishing it. And like I said, we used to think that size matters. You can tell I feel like really bad when I'm talking about this. But, you know, we used to say size matters. You know, you think, you know, they're not going to. And this, like I said, with this, you know, they shut you down. Nobody's asking questions about this, so I'm like, oh boy, I got a lot of them on here, and that's why I'm asking those questions. So here's one. I was gonna go on, but here's one. Many of us hobbyist cottage bakers will not make enough in a year's time to pay up to $1,000 in attorney's fees. What do you suggest for those of us that only do this as a side gig, or just holidays or special occasions? So I hope $1,000 in attorney fees. I'm assuming you're talking about trademarks, and if that's a trademark situation, then you look at all the self-help options. There are tons of self-help options. I think there's even a couple of YouTube videos on how to file your own trademark. If you're doing certain things, you're not talking products that doing the name of your business. Like I said, I'm not going to lie. I mean, you can do it yourself. Just do so with education. So what do you suggest for those of us that do this as a side gig or just as holidays or special occasions? You may not need a trademark. That trademarks, copyrights, even patents, like say you've developed something, it may not, you may not need it. You may not need it at all. And here comes Terry with an amazing question. How would you characterize inspiration so as not to infringe? So the general rule, remember, since I'm always like, I'm happy joy telling y'all how, the general rule is if it looks like it, it's infringing. Well, that's pretty broad in our situation. So how do you go to the line and not go over? and that is truly a case-by-case basis. So, for example, I happen to be one of my jobs, and I am honored, and those of you who, I always mention them, I am part-time corporate counsel for Design Bundles and Font Bundles. They are a wonderful online resource of inspiration, art, digital assets, downloads, all sorts of that wonderful stuff. So one of my jobs is to look at, why I brought that up is because how do I characterize inspiration, versus infringement? And that truly is, I just have to tell you, you have to be honest with yourselves. Our princesses are always easy. Are you doing Snow White with blue and, are you making a really cool, here, let's do an easier one here. Is it a princess's theme and do you have a pink cookie with a really cool crown on it? And maybe some blue birds or something? Is that infringement? No. We get the idea. The question is, do they get the idea? So this is where if we had our international friends, there are rules like, do you change so many things or whatever. But once again, that amazing common sense business acumen that you all have, you know when to use it. You know when to say, yeah, I'm going to do inspiration, but I'm not going to do direct copy. Or, you know what, this time around, and somebody just posted one recently, the most amazing Luca. I was just like, I think that's better than what I even saw on the, in the movie. That sometimes it just is what it is. And sometimes, and in explaining it to a customer, that's always the fun one. You can say, look, I don't infringe, but this is how close I believe I can come. And above all else, then, especially on the inspirations, I don't say this as much, but whatever business decision you make for yourself, okay? This is your business decision. Attorneys can tell you whatever they want. Accountants can tell you whatever. Whatever business decision you make for yourself, just be careful that you also don't publicize it too largely. So I wish I could be more help, but you're talking to the attorney who has litigated the differences in snow people, like snowmen, whatever you call them. So I can point out a lot of differences. Then there's always public domain. For example, public domain. If you do Wizard of Oz, the ruby slippers are from the movie. If you do black slippers, they're not. So there's always public domain as well. We're getting here close to time, so I just wanted to give you guys some general, please, I'll do this once so you can get your paper out, and then I'll do it again. This is my contact information. Like I said, I will tell you if boy, in this high tech, you're like, oh, Tammy. I will tell you if I am going to charge you. I'm real good at telling you that. But I'm also giving back to our businesses because somebody has given back to me over time. And I'll put this up again. Here are some general things about what we do. And Kimberly, real quick, which is better, LLC or SP? That's an accountant question. Easier to file, easier to maintain as an LLC, but you may have something going on for an SP that you need, you may need the tax availability with. But here are some general things. Communication, so these are the common sense legal things that I want to remind you of. Communication with your customer is key, but also communication with yourself. Communicate if you're going to be late, if you have changes, if you think there's something that might be better, if you have a formulation change. somebody asks, what do I put on a label? Well, you follow whatever. The laws are great. They tell you if you have to exactly what they're going to be. But you be honest with your customers and tell them exactly what you would want to know. So communication. Secondly, when it comes to the intellectual property of others, can I copy this? Can I use this trademark? Can I do that? Customer, you are known by what you do. So some customers don't care, but some do. And so if you're making business decisions, always remember that not legally, there may be something that's legally, there may be something that legally is right, but from a customer service and a marketing perspective, you may not want to do. And basically what I should title this is, I should be like David Letterman and say, top 10 ways to keep out of your attorney's office. To continue, put everything in writing. Clear language. There's no magic. I mean, yes, there's preferred language, but at the end of the day, an attempt is better than nothing. When it comes to your business entities, treat it like a separate business. Keep your money separate. Keep your records separate. Do as much as you can. And that's hard to say. If you only do 1 dozen cookies every couple of months, is it worth setting up a business? Well, who are you selling to? Are you doing it for fun? Are you going to spend more money than the $36 you make or the 50? I hope you're charging 90 or 100. When it comes to liability, the best thing I can say is document. If those of you who purchase things, and you're purchasing your supplies, I don't care if it's in Walmart, keep your receipts at least for 3 years if you've got them. Your accountant will tell you, probably tell you that, but I say from a liability perspective. At the end of the day, if you know that somebody got sick off of one of your ingredients or, something went wrong, you can show where you bought it from. And I guess the other legal question is don't be afraid to ask questions. There are resources out there. Yes, I am $3.25 an hour. Yes, I have colleagues that are $1,250 an hour. I have colleagues that are $200 or $100 an hour. But we also, are required to donate our time, like in the state of Texas. There are places out there for resources. Like I said, you're going to, if you have college law questions, and I've actually had to do this before for one of my clients, I called the 4-H extension. Right now in the state of Michigan, they have a whole thing going on, I think it's with MSU and their extension office on cottage laws. There are resources available. If you are a part of this group, I probably don't have to tell you about that. But the last thing is be true to your customers. How you market, how you sell, how you bake, whatever you do, be true. Tell the truth to yourself, tell the truth to your customers. I'm not calling them liars. I'm saying at the end of the day, by truing that up and marketing correctly and doing that, you save yourself a lot. So, sorry, don't want to be getting on a soapbox tonight. This is, AMA versus anything else. I'll put this up again. You just had a lawyer say, please feel free to email me and ask me questions. I have a Facebook page that I use sometimes. And I even have how you do. I have to speak next week on the whole social media thing. Here's my information again. It's Tammy at browning-smith.com or artsandcraftslaw.com. I'm telling you're basically getting a get out of jail free card, asking you to use it. Some of my answers may be, here, have you Googled it? Because I do that. But please, keep up the amazing work. I like Joe said, integrity. It is. You are known by the company you keep. And I'm going to tell you all something surprising. I have never advertised a day in my life. And I pride myself on that. And I say that I'm by referral only. So Hopefully here this will be on recording so you can come back and listen to it. Tammy at browning-smith.com. You may see me sometime make comments on your cookies, and eventually I'll be brave enough to do a photo shoot just because I want to do a photo shoot and use beads. Yes, I'm team beads. And so, like I said, hopefully I will be able to record this for you. If not, I'm going to be doing this again. So thank you all very much. And once again, have a great evening. So thank you.